Good afternoon. Today is Friday, and we have a live in this channel, El Canal de Margarita. It's really good. Sorry, El Jardín de Margarita. I'm a little bit nervous because I'm doing this interview in English, so that's why I'm a little bit nervous and forget the name of my channel. El Jardín de Margarita is a channel that is for Spanish for kids. So mostly I give tips for parents that they live in not in Spanish countries, so that they live in all around the world, and they have kids. And those kids sometimes they don't speak Spanish, so they need to learn as a heritage language. Because the parents they don't have the time to speak to their kids, because sometimes it's mixed couples, so whatever land plus Spanish speaking partner, so sometimes there is no time to talk to the kids in Spanish, so they need to learn Spanish as heritage language in school or with a private teacher or something. So, and today I want to talk about how important is the reading when you learn your heritage language. And we have with us Miha Kovač. That is, we have with us Miha Kovač. He's a writer and many other things, and he's going to introduce himself so I don't make a mess and you can have a clear idea where who is Miha Kovač that is with us today. Thank you very much for being here, Miha. Please introduce yourself to this big community.
Okay, well, as you said, my name is Miha Kovač. In German, that would be Michael Schmidt. In English, I would be Michael Smith. I don't know how would this translate to Spanish. Miguel Garcia, perhaps. I don't know. But I am a Slovenian. I teach at the Ljubljana University, and one of my main interests is the role of book reading in the time of screens. With other words, I want to figure out why reading books still matters. And I also want to figure out why speaking different languages remains an important thing, regardless the fact that it would be more practical if everybody of us would be speaking English or Spanish, for example.
Yeah, English or Spanish. They are the most learning languages as foreign language. Yeah. So first language is English, and the second one is Spanish. So that is really, they are really important languages. And none of us has English as first language, but we are communicating in English. So, and we go with the first question. Why is so important to read?
Well, I mean, reading as such is a skill without which we cannot survive. Even if we use just screen media, we need reading. But the thing which I would like a little bit to talk about now is why reading good old-fashioned books still matters. And here there are a few answers, I would say, and it depends, of course, what is important to somebody in personal life. But I would say that one of the main reasons actually is that book reading has a lot of important side effects. Economists would call them positive externalities. And one of the most important side effects of books reading is that whenever I read a book, regardless this is a fiction book or a non-fiction book or a poetry book, when I read a book, I encounter new words and new structures of the sentences. And this is important because one of the important things which makes humans different than other living creatures, besides smoking, of course, because I don't know for any animal that smokes, but the thing which makes us
I don't think
different
so. Any
from
animals that
animals,
smokes.
yeah, is that we speak. We have a language. And what we do with the language is that we express our thoughts with it. And it's a very simple parallel. If I as a person know only a few things, I can say just a few things about it. My cat knows only one word, meow, and she uses it whenever she's hungry or sad or she wants to go out or whatever. But we humans, we have a lot of words and we can discuss a lot of things. We can explain why we feel bad about something. We can explain if we are sick. We can explain why we don't like some food. We can discuss with our humans how to arrange human lives in society, and so on and so on. And it's very simple. More words that I know and more I'm used to use complex sentences, more complex things I can discuss. And of course, our lives in contemporary societies are extremely complex. So I would say that by learning books, we learn this basic skill, which is using different words and using complex sentences. And this is one of the preconditions of critical thinking. In other words, I cannot think critically and analytically without being, at least for a while in my life, a book reader. So this is, let's say, one of the most important reasons. And of course, another reason is that, especially when I read fiction, I train perspective taking. Because when I read fiction, I try to look to the world through the eyes of the heroes of the novel. I sometimes quarrel with them. I don't understand. I don't agree with them. But basically, I try to see the world through different lenses. And of course, one of the arguments would be, yeah, but this happens also when we watch a movie or a TV series. But my answer is that not a single media experience is so intensive regarding this perspective taking than book reading. Because when I watch a movie, I see everything on the screen. How the hero looks like, I see the relations among them, I see the surroundings. But when
Exactly.
I read the book, I have to
Yeah,
create all this in my head. So this is much more intense. And I would say from this point of view, the book reading is a brilliant training for empathy. And empathy is one of the most important things that human beings must be capable of if we want to live in democratic societies. Because without empathy, we cannot understand each other. So I would say that book reading from this point of view, somehow this combination of empathy and critical thinking is also a kind of a training in brackets for living in democratic societies. And from this point of view, it's very interesting. If you allow me just a quick political digression.
yeah, please.
In
Go ahead.
1930s, the world was quite ugly, almost as ugly as today, because there was Nazism in Germany, communism in Russia, fascism in Italy, and in United States, the administration of President Roosevelt started to discuss what to do to preserve democracy, because they had a feeling that the United States could also go in a non-democratic direction, especially so because there was this big depression and economic crisis. And the answer they produced was quite simple, actually. They invented social democracy with public works, public spending, public health, and so on. So they totally surprisingly, from today's perspective, they turned the United States into a kind of a social democratic country. But at the same time, one of the things they considered as very important was that they understood that only people who can think critically and empathically could be background of a democratic country. And because of this, they decided to invest heavily to the network of public libraries. And this remained the fact for next 50 years in United States. So this quite clearly shows, that almost 100 years ago, book reading was seen as one of the saviors of democracy. And my guess is that today might be, to an extent, similar, although the dangers are coming from other directions than of course, in 1920s and in 1930s, almost 100 years ago.
Wow. Reading really is important for so many reasons. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I am speechless because I knew a lot about the importance of reading, but I just my head blow. Wow. And because the importance of reading in only one language is well, it's really important reading in one language, the language that you speak. But what happened when it's a bilingual family? As I told before, this channel goes to bilingual families. So it's important that those kids read in their heritage language in order to understand better the culture and the linguistic of their heritage language. So the heritage of their families. So, for example, as Ecuadorian that live in Austria. So, yeah, maybe the kids they speak Spanish, but without the reading, it's possible to connect 100% to their heritage.
Yeah, well, I would say it's not only the question of heritage, actually. I think being multilingual is a great advantage. And there is a lot of studies which is showing this. For example, a lot of research was done on people. This is the disease of our age, dementia, especially of those who are older. And there are quite a few studies which show that those people who are fluent in more languages, they are more resistant to dementia because they have more active brain. And some psychiatrists even suggest that older people should start learning a new language in order to preserve their brain and their mental flexibility, let's say.
Yeah, I had a sorry, I interrupt you. I had a student that she started to learn Spanish when she was around 70 because she told me, I don't want to have Alzheimer's, so I need to study Spanish.
That's a very good reason, and there is another, let's say, individual reason, is that here there has not been done a lot of studies about this, but there are quite few indicators that show that people who are fluent in more languages are actually more creative and innovative than people who are fluent only in one language. Maybe if you look at the list of the countries which has the highest innovation index, that's something what the World Organization for Intellectual Property calculates, you will see that on the list of these countries are practically, this list is at the top of this list are countries where people have to be multilingual, because these countries are too small that you are actually forced to learn another language if you want to engage intellectually globally. Of course, also the United States are in this list, but again, if you would go to American research institutes and universities, you would see there a bunch of multilingual people. So my guess is that it's quite clear that being fluent in more languages enhances creativity and innovation. And I have a very simple theory why it is so. The fact is that languages are different. The word table is in some languages of different gender. The way how we swear differs from language to language. There are some languages in which you cannot swear. My Slovenian language is like this. So we swear in other South Slavic languages and in English.
Wow.
But we can complain very nicely in Slovenian. So to make the long story short, when you switch from one language to another, it opens a window to the new world to you, because there are different emotions, different ways of thinking there. And if you go more deep into this culture of different language, you can find also different habits and different cultural patterns. So moving from one language to another is a huge benefit. And Slovenia is a country of only 2 million speakers, and people in my country complain, oh, how poor we are, we need to learn foreign languages. But I say, no, this is a huge advantage for us. It makes us better than English or Americans or Chinese, because they're stuck to only one language. So I'd say that there are, on the personal level, there are many advantages which you get if you learn more than one language. And of course, if you are born in the mixed family, combining the languages of both parents is a huge benefit, because it involves you to move from one country to another.
And reading is really important.
To be totally honest, I feel sorry for myself because I don't speak Spanish. I speak English. I understand a kind of Autobahndeutsch. I understand a lot of South Slavic languages, but I don't speak Spanish. And my impression is that I'm missing the whole continent in South America and in Spain. And whenever I go, last year I went to Guadalajara book fair, and I felt terrible, because I saw so many interesting books which doesn't exist in other languages. So learning Spanish is a huge advantage. Believe me, as a it's a Spanish non-speaker who is saying this, and perhaps I can see this advantage is better than somebody who's embedded in Spanish language.
Yeah, and yeah, for us, Spanish-speaking people, we think the same with English. So because you are missing half of the word without talking another language. That is true. And so we are coming to the end, and I want you to give tips for all these mixed families that they are struggling with their kids, because their kids, they only want to play
with the screens.
Screen games and so on, and they refuse to read. And if they read in the language that they are the schooling language. So because it's easier to read the language that you are living, and Spanish is like some other day. So can you give us also to myself, I have a kid and I have to tell him, please read.
Well, that's, this is one of these questions which people usually say that that's €1 million question. which means that the answers to these questions are quite tough. But I would say that, and this is the painful part of this question, kids usually do what their parents do. So if the kids see their parents reading and putting away the phones, they might follow them. If parents don't read, then kids usually don't read either. So that's the role of the parents as role models here is very, very important. And of course, one very practical tip is that when kids are still small, you need to the best thing you can do for them is that you read them a lot. But reading to them means reading human reading, not machine reading. It doesn't work the same way if you have a story recorded on the smartphone and then you leave it to the kid to listen it. Because what matters in reading is this interaction. You know, you stop, kid asks question, you discuss with them, and he or she gets connected with your voice. So this really forms very, 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 very close connections between parents and kids, and they get this habit of reading through this kind of parent-kid reading, and they actually, on a smaller scale, they got all the benefits of reading. They broaden their vocabulary, and they meet for the first time more complex sentences that there are for them, of course, for their mindset in the books of kids. And regarding this problem of living somewhere else, surrounded by another language, that's very difficult. I have two close members of my family. My niece grew up in Vienna, and then I have a very funny family in United States, which is of Ukrainian and Slovenian background, living surrounded with English. And what both parents are trying to do is that they're trying to read them in their mother language. What was in the case of my niece quite simple because it was only some Slovenian, but in the case of American, it's a bit more complex because it's 3 languages. But I'd say, kids has enormously flexible minds. And for me, communicating in 3 languages would be a problem. But they don't know yet this is a problem. So they are more flexible in doing this. And if you read to them in the mother language, and if you communicate with them at home in the heritage language, my guess is that they would not suffer any problems. At least if I guess from the case of my niece, which is fluent in Slovenian and fluent in German. She made her schools in German and in French because she studied French. She had no problems whatsoever with this. But her parents started to connect with her in Slovenian from early on when they were living in Austria. But there is no clear-cut recipes how to do this. Every parent has to invent it for themselves. But my guess is it's worth doing. It's worth doing because, as I said, multilinguistic abilities are enormously important in being creative and innovative person. And of course, learning Slovenian is quite irrational because there is only 2 million speakers. But learning Spanish as a heritage language is extremely practical because it really opens the doors to 500 million people who speak this language.
But in the case of your niece, it's the heritage language. So I think even though it's only 2 million people that speak Slovenian, I think without Slovenian, it's really difficult to communicate, to understand the culture, to understand the people in Slovenia. So
absolutely. I mean, and one of the beauties of human culture is that even works which are literary works which are written 100 years ago, like poetry of Federico Garcia Lorca. I mean, it's still very much alive. Even Don Quixote by Cervantes is still very much alive. And knowing these parts of heritage culture is very important. And it's also, I think, very important to understand that, human civilization is not linked to the screens, but it's very old. And even in previous times, very important and interesting things happened which determine how we live today. So yeah, understanding this kind of cultural heritage is a benefit, I'd say. You lose a lot if you don't do this. You can live without this, of course, but your life is impoverished.
So to finish, we lose a lot if we don't read. So
yes,
keep reading, keep reading, keep reading. If you have babies, just read them in Spanish. If you have little kids or older kids, just keep reading and keep pushing them to read in Spanish. That is really, really important. And here I have this book. Yeah, this book from Miha Kovač on is reading is breathing. That is in Spanish is leer is respirar. It's not in Slovenian is another title, I know, but in Spanish is leer es respirar. So to finish this interview, please pushing your kids to read the Spanish in English, in German, in all the languages that they are surrounded to your kid. You will give them tools for future. Thank you, Miha, for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And now I didn't have the time to explain, I forget. Now when I close the meeting and I can not talk to you afterwards. So I say thank you very much again. And probably we will meet again in another interview with Mari Carmen or in a congress or any other in any other place. And it will be great if one day we can meet in person.
Okay, looking forward to it. Okay, goodbye.
Goodbye.